Hello YouTube and welcome to the next route learning video. On today's video we're going to be revisiting the Great Eastern Main Line and driving an Anglia Railways Class 86 with a rake of Mk2 coaches and a DBSO on the rear between Ipswich and London Liverpool Street on a non-stop service, which is a distance of around 68 3/4 miles. I have previously covered this journey in this direction in the past in a Class 90 set, however that was in a custom created scenario which I made myself, specifically for the video with an extremely low amount of AI to try and reduce the amount of lag which we experienced on the journey. So today's video should have a much more realistic level of AI as I'm driving an Armstrong Powerhouse scenario from Armstrong Powerhouse Scenario Pack 40 called 655 Norwich to London Liverpool Street. The Class 86 electric locomotive was built by British Rail at Doncaster Works and also English Electric at Vulcan Foundry. The locomotive was built between 1965 and 1966, and a total of 100 of these locomotives were produced. The total weight of each loco is 81 tonnes, and they run off the 25 kilovolt AC overhead electrification system. The locomotive has traction motors rated at 1,250 horsepower and a total power output of 5,000 horsepower, giving a tractive effort of 60,000 pounds of force. The maximum speed of the locomotive is 100 miles per hour, however we won't be able to reach that on this journey today even though the speed limit is that high, just because in Train Simulator it seems that the locomotive won't go above around 94 miles per hour, even in full power. Once in the cab of the Class 86 there's not a lot that I need to do, and the main thing of course is to put the reversing handle into the forward position so we can move. However, I'm not actually going to do that until we're cleared to move, as I think that is correct procedure, and indeed you will hear the motors start powering up as soon as I put the reversing handle into the forward position. Now, just to quickly go through the controls in the cab, because there are certain differences in driving techniques which you use with the Class 86 in comparison with other locos. So first of all, just to point out, over here we have the train brake handle, which is currently set quite high, and so if I move that now, you can see the brake gauge, which are the two needles there on the middle of the three gauges at the top of the screen. Those needles are falling, indicating that the brakes are releasing, and indeed they will point to 0 when the brakes are fully released, and the higher they point, then the harder the brakes are applied. Just above the train brake handle we have the locomotive brake handle, which you can see there, which is right next to the gauge on the left hand side. And so that controls the brakes on just the locomotive. Now down here we have a horn, which is a two-tone horn controlled with the spacebar and the B key, and that's because I have the Armstrong Powerhouse sound pack installed for Class 86s and 87s. And now if we head over to this side, you can see there we've got the speedometer, which is the gauge next to the green, yellow and red ammeter gauges, and so that's measured in miles per hour as always. And now down here we have the reversing handle, which you can see has 4, 0 and rev, which is forward, neutral and reverse. And then just here we have the power handle. Now the power handle in the Class 86 is the same as the power handle in the Class 87, and it's a rather unique type of power handle known as a tap changer. So if I now put the locomotive in forward for a moment just to demonstrate this. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to move the power handle to the middle position that says hold there, and as you can see that's not actually done anything. What we need to do is look at this gauge, which is to the right of the ammeter gauges, which are the green, yellow and red gauges, and you can see there that it's got a percentage and there's a needle there currently pointing at 0. Now if I want to start applying power so that we can move the train, I'm just going to apply the brakes a bit more so the train doesn't move. And now simply need to tap the power handle. So if I tap A, what you'll notice is that the power handle will move up for a second and then move back to the position it's currently in. As I do that, the needle there, you probably just noticed, jumped slightly, indicating that I'm starting to apply power. If I do it again, the needle is jumping a bit more, and so on. And so you keep doing that. I think there's possibly 32 steps of power on this locomotive, if I remember correctly. Now, you can just set the power handle to continuously run up through the power settings all the way to 100% by moving the power handle even further to that direction, like so. However, one of the problems with that is that you can easily end up giving the train more power than you're supposed to, and on the Class 86 that can actually cause a fault. You can also run down in the same way, so I can just tap down like so if I press that, or you can move the power handle into that position and it will constantly run down, as you can see. However, once you've moved it into the run down or off position, you then have to wait for all of the settings to go to 0, so the needle has to fall all of the way to 0 before you can start to reapply power once again. So next to that on the left we have the ammeter, as I mentioned. Now as you start applying power, what happens with the ammeter is those needles climb, and the more power you apply then the higher those needles are. What you need to aim to do is not allow the needles on the ammeter to go into the red zone. If you do, you risk a fault with the train, which requires powering off and a special reset procedure to sort it out. I'm not going to go through that reset procedure in this video today, but in the future when I make a train guide in the Class 86, then I will indeed go more into depth into the control methods for this loco, and we'll also look at things such as resetting faults. I think that pretty much covers everything that we need to cover right now, so just going to take a quick look outside the train before our departure to London Liverpool Street. Departing from Ipswich, the starting speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and as I mentioned a little while ago, we've got 68 3/4 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is London Liverpool Street. So as you can see, I'm just tapping the power up very gently and bringing the needles on the ammeter just to the edge of the green zone, as I don't need to accelerate particularly quickly here due to the current speed limit. As you can see, the speed limit here is going up to 30 as we enter this tunnel. However, that won't apply until we reach the other end of the tunnel, until the rear of the train has passed the board. We're now doing around 20 miles per hour, so I'm going to start tapping down once again, just to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. The tunnel that we're going through here, I believe, is called Stoke Tunnel, though I could be wrong, and it is the only tunnel on the entire Great Eastern Main Line between Norwich and London. So at this point I can now be sure that the rear of the train has passed the board and we can accelerate up towards 30 miles per hour. However, I'm going to do that very slowly for a moment. As you probably just noticed there, the speed limit here is now going up to 45 miles per hour, and I should be able to accelerate to that at the next speed board we pass, which is for a further increase in the speed limit to 70 miles per hour. And indeed you can see the 70 mile per hour board is coming up just here. So I can now start to run up the power a bit. So I'm just tapping that up and I'm keeping an eye on the ammeter. There's nothing wrong with taking it into the yellow zone, but I prefer to keep it sort of around the middle rather than taking it too far into the yellow zone. So the speed limit is now 70 miles per hour, and it will then be very shortly going up to 100 miles per hour. And that will be the speed limit for the majority of our journey to London today. I would also just like to point out at this point that again, while I'm using the usual FOV settings, like in the last video on the East Coast Main Line with the Class 365, I have zoomed in one notch on the mouse wheel, just because I felt it was too far back with the default FOV setting that I normally use. At this point, I've now put the power handle into the run-up position just to allow it to go all the way up to full. As you can see, it's not really having much of an effect on the ammeter. And now that we're at full power, I'm going to bring the power handle back to the middle position so that I can reduce the power more quickly if necessary. At this point, we're now going uphill on a 1 in 135 upward gradient, which is affecting our ability to accelerate. One of the challenges with making a video like this where there are actually no stops is of course that if I do mess up on this journey, I have to go all the way back to the start and re-record it, so I'm really hoping that I don't. If you're hearing this at this point, then you're hearing my first recording on this route. I've practiced this journey a couple of times in the last couple of days just to try and ensure that I get it correct. And indeed we will experience some adverse signals after we've passed Colchester and head towards Chelmsford and then London. So I do need to keep an eye out on the signals on this journey. We've now got up to 80 miles per hour and the train will continue to accelerate for now, and it should stop at around 92.5 miles per hour, which is the maximum speed it seems to be able to maintain on a level gradient. However, if we start going downhill, then there is the possibility that the train will accelerate slightly further. However, I've certainly never seen it reach 100 miles per hour, let alone exceed it. So we should be able to just leave the train in full power in all of the 100 mile per hour speed zones on this journey. I do apologise for the slight lag which keeps appearing on this journey. Unfortunately, the Great Eastern Main Line is one of the most demanding routes in the game, especially when you've got realistic AI, and so even with a powerful computer, just due to the game's poor optimisation, it does still cause some issues with the frame rates. Indeed, I've also had to turn down the texture quality settings once again, just to try and ensure that the game won't crash while I'm driving this journey. I must confess that I really do have quite a great love for these old BRAC locomotives. The Class 86 and 87 were particular favourites of mine, though I think I slightly prefer the Class 87 over the 86, probably just because it's slightly more powerful and of course it had a slightly higher maximum speed. And I can remember travelling behind Class 86s and 87s on the West Coast Main Line in the early 2000s, so in my mid to late teens, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. The last time I remember being on a Class 87 I think was the year 2004, when I was travelling from Crewe towards London after a holiday with my family in North Wales. The next year we still had loco hauled stock, and indeed from Llandudno Junction down to Crewe we had a Class 47 hauled train. The DVT was actually on the front and the Class 47 was connected directly to that. Just to say that we've now got a warning for an upcoming speed reduction to 80 miles per hour, so at this point I'm just running down in the power, but the warning is 1.5 miles from the speed limit itself, so we don't need to brake quite yet. So as I was saying, I had a Class 47 hauled train from Llandudno Junction through to Crewe, and then at Crewe they took the Class 47 off the DVT at the front of the train, and then they coupled a Class 90 onto the rear of the train, and then that propelled us all of the way to London Euston. Now that I've run down in power, the train is very slowly starting to lose speed. We now have a further warning for another speed reduction down to 70 miles per hour coming up, and at this point I'm now applying the brakes to slow us down for the upcoming speed restrictions. So just passing the 80 board now, and the 70 board will be coming up very shortly. And now that we're doing 70 miles per hour, I've shut off the power and I'm allowing the train to coast just for a moment In fact, no, I'm going to start stepping up now, just to try and ensure that we don't lose too much speed, though I won't give too many steps of power at this point. The speed limit has now dropped to 70 miles per hour. The line joining us from the left is the Harwich branch, which Just Trains have actually released an extension to this route covering that journey, which I have and I've already made a video on. And now we're passing through Manningtree Station. The speed limit here is now going back up to 100 miles per hour, so I'm just putting the power handle straight back into the run-up position so that we start gaining power again and we're able to accelerate back up towards 100. Once again, we're going uphill on this section on a 1 in 132 uphill gradient, which is affecting our ability to accelerate. I must also say that this particular route in Train Simulator is one of my favourites. I think it was really well put together, and I've just always really enjoyed driving on the Great Eastern Main Line all the way back from the days of Microsoft Train Simulator, when there was a Great Eastern Main Line add-on released. The Great Eastern Main Line add-on in Microsoft Train Simulator covered a much larger area than this one, though it didn't have the Felixstowe branch, which this add-on does, which I have to say I do enjoy driving on the Felixstowe branch, and it also gives more scope for freight scenarios. That being said, the original Microsoft Train Simulator version from Making Tracks covered the journey from London Liverpool Street to Ipswich, but it also included the branches to Southend, Southminster, Clacton, Walton-on-the-Naze, Harwich and Sudbury, and so it just had so much more selection of places to drive to. I found it much more entertaining to drive than the route that we have currently in Train Simulator 2016. So at this point, I'd just like to let you know that the next video I plan on recording now will be on the Northeast Corridor, New York to New Haven route. I've been driving on that a little bit more recently, practicing some of the journeys and just seeing how the performance is, and it's definitely at a recordable state now, so I'm hoping that that will be the next video I make within the next few days. It should certainly be this week. I'm not sure which direction to drive yet, whether to drive the full route or not, or even which train to drive. I am slightly limited in terms of the scenarios I can use due to having a lack of DLC for that route. But one of the pieces of DLC I did buy was the M8, and I have to say I particularly enjoy driving that unit, so I'm considering possibly doing the video in the M8. If not, it will likely be the Acela Express. So I'm going to give that some consideration, see what scenarios are available, and then take it from there to decide which scenario to use for my video on that route. I'm also very much looking forward to the New Jersey route, which is coming to Train Simulator very shortly. Of course, that also comes out of New York, though it comes out the opposite direction. And once that is released, I plan on making videos on that fairly quickly. I think that's going to be a route that I'm going to particularly enjoy driving on, and I think it will make some great videos for this channel. We now have a warning for an upcoming drop in the speed limit to 90 miles per hour, which is 1 mile from the limit itself. So at this point I've just set the power to run down, as we don't need to brake too much to slow for that. However, there is a fairly steep downhill gradient coming up, down at 1 in 120, and in fact you can see it starting here, which will cause the train to accelerate and affect our braking abilities. You can see the bottom of the gradient coming up just ahead, and you can now see the 90 speedboard in the distance, which is sort of the white glowing thing there. So I'm just applying the brakes at this point to ensure that the speed is low enough in time, and indeed I have now got the speed below 90 miles per hour. We're down to 85, and so at this point I'm now going to once again start running up the power just to ensure that I don't lose too much speed. The lines joining us just a minute ago came from Clacton and Walton on the Naze, and also Colchester Town, and this is Colchester Station. The speed limit has now gone back up to 100 miles per hour, so I've just put the power handle into the full run-up position again, and then once we're in full power I'll then move it back to the central position, which is actually something I think that I forgot to do after accelerating away from the speed limit at Manningtree. I've had a few more requests recently to possibly make videos in other simulators, train simulators more specifically, such as BVE or World of Subways, and I actually don't think that that's a bad idea at all. Personally, I quite like BVE, although the graphics aren't especially good. The train handling seems pretty good, and the sounds are fairly realistic as well. And I remember playing a version of BVE 10 years ago, and ever since then I've sort of followed its progress, though I don't really play it much anymore. It's certainly something I'd like to look at again, and so if people are interested in that, then I'm happy to make some BVE videos just to show you how to drive in that. It would more likely be Open BVE, which I believe is the sort of current best version of BVE which is available. As for World of Subways, I've only played one of them, which is the Circle Line game, and I don't presently own any of the World of Subways franchise, so I would be quite interested in getting hold of some just to give it a try. That being said, of course, that is an expense right now which I probably could do without, as I've just started university, and I'm not, oh, and of course I've just bought a new computer, so I'm not in the best financial position right now, but certainly after Christmas in January I should be a lot better off, and so consequently I'll look into possibly buying some other games such as all of the World of Subway series to cover them in some future videos. We're now passing through Mk2 station, with the diesel-only Sudbury branch diverging on the right-hand side there. Something else I've been doing recently is going through and compiling a list of train-related strategy games, past and present, so I'm hoping to also diversify into covering some of them rather than just simulation videos. I'd like to make this channel more comprehensive and more open to people in the hopes that it will reach a wider audience. So a game such as Railroad Tycoon, Locomotion, or Train Fever are all games which I'm looking to potentially feature in the future. I'm sure there are more games that I can't think of right now, but if you can think of any train related games then to do with strategy or even simulation, then please let me know in the comments. I know I've asked this question before, but I just want to make sure that people don't miss it, so I can try and get as comprehensive a list of train related games that I could potentially cover as possible. Another one which I just realised I forgot to mention is the A-Train series, which again are train-related strategy games, though I've not really played any since, I think it was the original A-Train game, which was DOS-based back in the mid-1990s. I remember playing that, but I haven't actually played any since then. So I think that it would be good to check out some of the newer games in the series and see how they run and how to play them, and certainly if I enjoy them then I will definitely make some videos on them to put on this channel. Along this section I can see here just how much recording is actually affecting the frame rates, because when practicing this journey I was getting a solid 30 frames a second along here, and currently it seems to have a maximum of around 21 to 22 frames a second. So recording is actually taking 8 to 9 frames a second off of the video. We're now passing Kelvedon station. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not 100% certain. It's one, I think it's the only place on this route where I've really struggled to get to grips with the pronunciation. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in a previous video or not, but I recently downloaded a ZX Spectrum emulator, which I've been having a lot of fun with, I must say. I've been playing some of the old Spectrum games that I remember as a kid, just having a quick mess around, and it's bringing back some great memories and a great feeling of nostalgia. But as part of that, I would love to make a video highlighting the very old Southern Belle and Evening Star train simulators, and so I'm hoping to do that in the not too distant future. I have managed to find a copy of Southern Belle online, which I've run through the emulator, and it works. Of course, it certainly won't be much of a series there. It will just be a one video highlighting it with the lovely wireframe graphics in a glorious 8 colours, using a total of 48 kilobytes of RAM, which I guess back then was quite advanced. Certainly to try and attempt to even make some form of a 3D train simulator on the ZX Spectrum was a very audacious project to begin with, and I do think that for the time they did a really good job. It was Hewson Consultants who made the game, and they did a very good job at the time. Of course, there is also the Commodore 64 version, which had slightly improved sounds, but the graphics were just, well, pretty much the same. And there's also another one, Evening Star, so whereas Southern Belle covered the journey from London to Brighton in just that direction, Evening Star also covered, I believe it was the Somerset and Dorset Railway. We're now coming up on Whittam Station, and the line just joining us from the right is from Braintree. It appears that I have an adverse signal coming up there. In fact, that is a double yellow signal. So I've just set the power handle to run down. I'm not sure how far apart the signals are along here. So I'm just going to start applying the brakes, though I'm not going to brake hard. I'm just going to gradually bring our speed off. And as we get closer to the single yellow, which it looks like we are doing now, I'm now going to increase the brakes a bit more just to ensure that I've got enough brake force to stop the train. So after passing the single yellow signal, I'm going to slow to a speed which means that if the next signal is red, then I'm travelling slow enough that I will be able to stop at it without any problems. So I'm now down to around 35 miles per hour, which should be just about right for now. And I'm just trying to keep an eye on the track ahead to see what aspect the next signal is displaying. It looks like, well, just about to say it looks like the signal is red, but I just saw it jump up to a single yellow, so we don't need to stop at this signal. I'm going to give just a small amount of power now to bring the speed up slightly, but not by much, just because we still need to travel at quite a slow speed when travelling under single yellow signals. I'm not going to go above 40 miles per hour at this point. As the signal just stepped up to a double yellow just before we passed it, as I hope you just saw there, I'm now going to increase the power and accelerate a bit more, though still not too much. I can travel a bit faster while travelling under double yellow signals, so I'm going to aim more towards 55 to 60 miles per hour until we pass a green signal, at which point I'll then go back up to full power and accelerate back up towards line speed. We're now passing Hatfield Peveril Station. The signal there just jumped to green just as I'd put the power handle to run down, so I'm now going to have to wait for a moment until it's fully run down before I can then run it up once again. Though I'm not going to for a moment, as I can see that we've still got a yellow signal ahead. If that does jump up to green before we get to it, I will then start running up to full power. Which it now has done. So I've now put the power handle into the full run-up position. And we're already travelling at a fast enough speed that the ammeter needles won't climb too quickly. A question that's been asked of me by a few people now is what's different in Train Simulator 2016? And my honest answer has to be not a lot. The new features such as the railfan mode or the steam driving assist mode, I can't remember the proper name of it, They're for the new content which comes with Train Simulator 2016, but for the existing content there's absolutely no changes at all, other than a change of the name and also a change of the menu skins. That really is it. So if you don't own the routes which come with the new game, then I highly recommend buying it, because I do think it is good value for money. However, if you already own the routes, then there's absolutely no point in really buying it unless you particularly want the gas turbine, or of course the Riviera line in the 1950s, which won't be a standalone product. And I also think it's there's the German BR155 also won't be a standalone product. What I'm looking out for along here now is a Morpeth board warning for an upcoming 85 mile per hour speed limit. At that warning we've got 1¼ miles to go to the limit itself, and 1½ miles to go to a further speed reduction down to 60 miles per hour. Indeed, we've reached the 85 warning now, so I've just put the power into the run down setting. The train will actually coast down to below 85 miles per hour at this point. Indeed, you can see there that we've now got a warning also for the upcoming 60 speed limit. I'm going to start applying the brakes for the upcoming 60 speed limit in a moment, just after passing this second overbridge here after the 60 warning. Indeed, I also have adverse signals to take into account here. So we've just passed the 85 speed board, and the 60 board will be coming up very shortly. The signals here are quite close together, so I need to continue to brake to slow down for a potential red signal coming up in a moment. We've just entered the 60 speed zone at 60 miles per hour, and as you can see I've now got a single yellow signal, so I'm continuing to brake to slow down for the next signal, which is currently displaying a red aspect. And we're just coming up on now Chelmsford, which is one of the major places on the route. So I'm just coming up to the signal at a slow speed, and I've been trying to avoid stopping at the signal. And indeed, you can see that the signal has now jumped up to a single yellow, so at this point I can give a small amount of power, though certainly not too much, as I know that the upcoming signal is not far away. We've now got a repeater just here, which has just changed. Initially it was showing a horizontal line, indicating that the signal at the end of the platform here at Chelmsford was displaying a red, but now it's at an up diagonal position. It's now indicating that the signal at the other end of the platform here is now not displaying red, though it doesn't tell me what colour it is. I'm going to assume for now that it's going to be a single yellow, which indeed it is. And it's now jumped up to a double yellow. However, I still don't want to accelerate too quickly, knowing that I'm following another train. I am going to give a little bit more power, and I'm going to accelerate up to again between 50 and 60 miles per hour until I'm running under green signals, at which point I'll then accelerate up towards line speed. And the line speed here is now going up to 85 miles per hour, and it will now be 85 between here and Shenfield. Indeed, the rear of the train has cleared the 85 board just at this point as we exit the viaduct. And now shutting off the power once again, and I'm just going to allow the train to coast at this point, as I am still travelling under adverse signals, and indeed that was a single yellow ahead, which has now just jumped up to a double yellow aspect. It looks like that the signal ahead is displaying currently a double yellow, and I'm hoping that it jumps up to a green before we get to it, so that I can increase the power and start to accelerate more. Already going to give a little bit more power as we have slowed to around 45 miles per hour, though I would still like to be able to accelerate up towards line speed at this point. Indeed, it has now just jumped up to green, so I'm now going into the full run-up position with the power. So now I have this new computer, I've actually got plans to make videos on pretty much every add-on again. Many of them will be return journeys from previous videos which I've made, and some like this will be on journeys that I have actually made before using a different train, really just to show the routes off in higher graphics settings, and also to show how the routes handle even on a fairly powerful computer, so that you can see the routes which struggle more and the routes which run better. There's some good interesting variations in the performance of the various routes in Train Simulator. Some are absolutely brilliant and some really not so good. One route which I am planning on making a return journey on very shortly, it's likely to be the next route learning video after the New York to New Haven one, will actually be West Coast Mainline Trent Valley, as in the past when I made a video on that route on release day, I had quite a few performance issues because my old CPU just really didn't handle the route very well. But last night I was practicing on that route and just having a drive-through, and I was getting between 40 and 50 frames a second, which is more than double the frame rate that I had before, and I think that that route could actually be quite an enjoyable one to cover in very high graphics settings with that kind of performance. So I'm hoping to get a video up on that within the next week or so. I am now stepping down as we've reached close to 85 miles per hour. I just want to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit along here. Looks like we are still accelerating slightly, so I'm just going to run down a bit more. Now move the power handle back to the central position to hold the power setting at that point. I'd also like to say I have not forgotten the Settle to Carlisle route guide video, which I am planning on doing and have written the script for already. It's just been that since starting university within the last couple of weeks, I haven't had an awful lot of time to commit to making videos, which is why you probably noticed there was quite a large gap between them. I think around 2 weeks between the West Somerset Railway route learning video and the South London network one between East Croydon and London Bridge. So I am starting to make more videos again now, but it's an extremely time-consuming process to make a route guide video, so while it will be made, it's just going to take a little while. I mention that just because I've had quite a few people asking me when that video will be made or released. We're now passing Ingatstone Station. We've now got a warning for an upcoming 75 mph speed limit. The warning is actually 1.5 miles from the speed limit itself, and so now we just reached the next signal there, and they're going to run down the power to ensure that it is low enough. And I now need to keep a close eye on the signals ahead, as just outside of Shenfield there are some extremely short signal sections, as short as 1/4 mile long, and it's very easy to end up flying through a red signal if you're not careful. So I do need to keep a close eye on the signals, and if we see any adverse signals, then I'm going to brake very hard very quickly to ensure that I slow down in time. I'm not sure if that's quite realistic, if they really have 1/4 mile long signal sections on a main line with a speed limit of 75 mph. Doesn't seem quite right to me, but that's how it's been done in the game. So I have now got the brakes on. I am slowing for the 75 limit, but beyond that I'm also slowing due to the adverse signal just there, though now it has changed to a green aspect. I should actually be cleared through the station and through the very short signal sections. The line that's just joined us on the left and also on the right are the lines from Southend and Southminster. We're now passing through Shenfield Station, and we've now got a warning saying to ensure the simulator doesn't crash, we recommend you save this scenario, which certainly you need to on certain computers. However, I didn't encounter that problem when driving this journey in a practice run, so I'm hoping it doesn't happen today. As I've already mentioned, I would have to jump right back to the start at Ipswich if I encountered any errors at this point, as I've had no opportunity to be able to save the game and ensure that I don't have to jump all the way back. The speed limit here is now going up to 80 mph, and then very shortly it's going to be going up to 90 mph. However, in a class 86 on this section between Shenfield and Liverpool Street, even though the speed limit is 90, I believe that I'm only permitted to travel at 80 mph due to signal spacing and braking distances. So as a result of that, I'm going to aim to try and go at no faster than 80. In a moment the gradient is going to start going downhill on a 1 in 90 gradient. And so I'm going to start running down the power as we approach around 74 to 75 miles per hour, and then I'm going to use the brakes if necessary to control the speed. Indeed, we're now going to be travelling downhill all the way between here and Harold Wood Station, which is around 3 or 4 miles away at this point. Just started the rundown process, but I realised that I wasn't running down quick enough, so I've had to move the power handle into the off position just to ensure that I don't end up breaking the speed limit. We're now passing through Brentwood Station. So unlike moving the power handle into the normal run down position, when you move it into the off position, it seems that it cuts off the power straight away, even though it takes a while for the notches to cut down. So I recommend that if you need an immediate cut in your power. Just like to say, mentioning university a little while ago, I've been enjoying my daily commute to university. I need to commute an hour each way between Bexhill and Falmer Station on the outskirts of Brighton. I've normally got a choice between a Class 377 and a Class 171. Although sometimes, like last week, I ended up on a very old Class 313 unit for the duration of the journey between Bexhill and Falmer. But one of the things I've been noticing are what I've been terming Southern's ghost trains, which is, I'm not quite sure what's happening, but I'll arrive at the station just before a train is due, and then on the information board there it will say that the train is due but running, say, 3 or 4 minutes late. The announcer on the station will say the train is approaching, and he'll then announce that the train has arrived, and yet there is no train. And then a minute or two later, the train will disappear from the information board as if it never existed. So I'm guessing Southern are either running some camouflaged or ghost trains, or there's a serious problem with the information system in this area on the railway stations. The gradient here is now levelling out as we're approaching Harold Wood Station. And so I'm now going to need to apply some power to try and ensure that we don't end up slowing down too much. We're now passing through Harold Wood. So as you probably noticed from Shenfield, we are now running 4-track. This track and the track next to me are the fast lines, and the furthest 2 tracks there are the slow lines, which on this route are known as the electric lines. And indeed Class 315s run along there, which we don't presently have in Train Simulator, but when Wagons and Armstrong Powerhouse finally make and release the Class 315, then that will be perfectly suited to the electric lines. Indeed, I'd also like to cover some journeys on that route, or on the electric lines, on stopping services between Liverpool Street and Shenfield in the Class 315. We're now passing through Gidea Park Station. It looks like that I've got a good power setting to roughly maintain 80 miles per hour at this point. I'm not speeding up or slowing down too quickly, but I am going to keep an eye on the speedometer just to make sure I am using the correct power settings. The line that's just joined us on the left is the line from Upminster, which is only around 3 or 4 miles long, I believe, and that links on to the line from London Fenchurch Street to Shoebury-Ness. We're now passing through Romford Station. I've just cut the power back by a notch because it looked like the speedometer needle has climbed to 80, which means I may still be slightly accelerating, and I just want to ensure that I'm not. We're now passing Chadwell Heath Station. Other than Romford and Ilford on this route, I'd just like to point out that on the fast lines, I believe there are no trains stop at any of the stations. I should include Stratford in that actually. So at Stratford, Romford and Ilford, fast line trains may stop. However, all of the other stations, it's only trains on the electric lines which stop at them. So the platforms we're going through here are technically closed, though they could still be used in an emergency. We're now passing through Goodmayes Station. We're now passing through Seven Kings Station. Now coming up on the right hand side is Ilford EMU Depot. We've just passed through Ilford Station, and now the electric lines are going to climb on a flyover just here and then cross over to the other side of us to end up on the left hand side, and they're going to remain on that side of us all of the way into London Liverpool Street. We're now passing Manor Park Station. I can now see that we have an adverse signal ahead, so I am now running down through the power settings. I'm going to start applying the brakes very quickly, as I know that the signal sections here are fairly close, so they're fairly short. We're now passing through Forest Gate Station. I've just temporarily released the brakes at 50 miles per hour to allow the train to coast for a moment. As you can see, there is now a single yellow signal ahead, so I'm going to apply the brakes more now, as the red signal is just the other side of the station which is coming up, which is Maryland Station. I've now put the brakes on again as we enter the platform here at Maryland, just to ensure that I am slowing down quick enough to stop at the red signal. Indeed, it is displaying a red aspect, it hasn't changed or jumped up. And so I'm going to stop just around the area of the end of the platform here, which should be a good place to stop. So the signal has now cleared to a single yellow aspect, and so I can now start to power up. I'm going to need to drive with extreme caution because the next signal is fairly close at the other end of the platform at Stratford Station, which is just coming up. Gave the train there slightly more power than I planned, so I just cut the power back by a notch to ensure that the ammeter didn't climb too quickly. I'm now running the power down just to allow the train to coast until I can see what aspect the next signal is displaying. So we're now passing Stratford Station, and we've got around 4 miles to go now to London Liverpool Street. And unfortunately you can notice one of the bugs in Train Simulator at the overbridge just there, where you can see that the people who should be walking on the bridge are actually dangling below the bridge with just their heads above the bridge itself. So we do now have a green aspect here, so I'm going to start stepping up the power to bring our speed up. The speed limit is still 80 miles per hour, so I can accelerate up towards that, though we probably won't get to 80 before I need to start slowing down again. On the right hand side you can see the Olympic Park, which wouldn't have existed during the time which this scenario is based, which is 1999. On our left hand side you can see there the Docklands Light Railway, indeed you can see the third rail from that. And also at Stratford Station there are 2 underground platforms for the Central Line, which link directly with the main platforms. It's also a link with the Jubilee Line as well, which runs between Stanmore and Stratford. I've now put the power to the full run-up position, as we're now going fast enough that the ammeter shouldn't climb too quickly. So for those of you who don't know, the Docklands Light Railway to our left is what is a railway in London that's not part of the London Underground network. It is certainly to carry people around London. It's actually operated by computers with no driver on board, though they do have what's known as a passenger service agent. There are actually no drivers, and so indeed you can sit at the front on the Docklands Light Railway and see out the front of the train. Now, the AWS warning that you just heard is actually for a warning for a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit coming up, but for some reason the Morpeth board doesn't appear on this side, it only appears on the electric lines. So I am now just going to apply the brakes to bring the speed down towards 60. Just because I know that the 60 limit is coming up. Something else I notice here, which has happened every time I've driven into London on this scenario, is that the moon which was in the sky, which already didn't look quite right, has now changed to an odd square blob shape. We've now got a double yellow signal and the speed limit has dropped to 60 miles per hour. The signal sections here are fairly close together, so I am applying the brakes to bring our speed off fairly quickly. You probably just noticed we've also got a Morpeth board warning for an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed restriction. You can now see our next signal just ahead, and it is currently displaying a red. So I'm now going to gradually bring our speed down to try and crawl up to the signal in the hopes that we don't actually have to stop at it. So we're now crawling towards the signal at around 5 miles per hour, and it doesn't seem to be wanting to change quite yet. I believe that there is a train just affecting us on the junction just ahead with the Hackney Downs line, where the Hackney Downs Fast joins the Down Main. In fact, you can see there the Class 321 is actually crossing now onto this track which we are currently on. And so once he's cleared the signal section just ahead, I should then be able to drive into Liverpool Street Station. So at this point, just while we're waiting for clearance, I just wanted to make another comment, which is about requests for videos. As you know, I've always welcomed requests for videos on this channel. However, I do get so many requests that I just can't make them all. It just wouldn't be practicable. And sometimes I'm being asked to make the same journey several times over in several different trains, which again just wouldn't be practicable. So although I do endeavour to make as many requests as I can, and indeed doing a Class 86 journey is one that's been requested a number of times now, I can't guarantee getting every request done. And so I just ask, please don't get annoyed with me if I don't make your request. I know I've had a couple of people who have been not too happy with me, to say the least, but I just can't get around to making every request which is ever made to me. So the Hackney Downs lines are now joining from the right, which include the lines to towards Hackney, Stansted Airport and Cambridge. And we're now passing Bethnal Green Station, which is on the Hackney Downs lines there, and that is the last station before Liverpool Street Station. We're now starting on a downward gradient which will affect our ability to brake and will indeed cause us to accelerate a bit more. And so I now need to keep an eye on the speed just to ensure that I don't end up breaking the speed limit. Coming up shortly will be a drop in the speed limit down to 30 miles per hour, so I need to be keeping an eye out for that. Now just for the moment I'm applying the brakes to ensure that I don't end up breaking the current 40 speed limit. We're now coming up towards Bishopsgate Tunnel, which you can see on the right hand side there, and the speed limit is dropping to 30 shortly after this curve just here. It looked like the signal just ahead of me jumped up to a double yellow and then back to a single yellow, if I just saw that correctly. I was looking at the speedometer and then just quickly glanced up at the signal, so I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I clearly have a red signal just ahead. As you can see, the speed limit here is now dropping to 30 miles per hour, though I'm already doing far below that due to the upcoming signal. So I'm once again aiming to just crawl up to the signal here in the hopes that it will clear before I have to stop. In fact, I think it's the Class 321 that's just coming out of Liverpool Street just ahead, which is actually currently giving the adverse signal here. Indeed, we now have a green signal indicating that we are cleared now all of the way into the platform at Liverpool Street. Do take note here that there is a 15 mile per hour Morpeth board indicating that the speed limit will be dropping to 15 shortly after entering the station. And so just after we pass under the next bridge, after the one that we're going under now, we then sort of go underground because Liverpool Street station is a more underground station. And just after that, the speed limit will then be dropping to 15. So at this point I'm now running down in the power once again. We're actually doing closer to 20. So I'm just going to apply the brakes just very quickly, just to ensure that I've slowed down to 15 in time, which I now have. At this point I'm just going to allow the train to coast at 15 miles per hour. I shouldn't really need to add any power approaching the end of the platform, and this should be now just enough momentum to keep us going all of the way to the end. The 10 above the signal just here indicates that we are cleared into London Liverpool Street, platform 10. As you can see, we're coasting nicely towards the end of the platform. I will start using the brakes in a minute to bring our speed down more. Although at low speeds like this, I find even minimal brake settings to be at times over-effective. As you can see here, we're slowing down very quickly indeed, and I've already got down from 15 to 5 miles per hour. And so I'm just going to apply the brakes a bit more just as we get closer to the buffers, shortly after the buffers have disappeared. And it looks like we're slowing down slightly too early because, as I already mentioned about the over-effectiveness of the brakes. However, I should be able to stop just here, just waiting for the front of the 86 next to us to just move slightly further back. And this should be about the right place to stop. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you have enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that you can find me on Facebook for the latest updates. The link of my Facebook page is in the description of this video. And if you value the work that I do and would like to sponsor me towards the cost of future projects and new equipment, then please visit my Patreon page for further information. Again, the link for that is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.